Jan Żabiński had been the director of the Warsaw Zoo for 10 years when the German army invaded Poland. He and his wife Antonina had developed it into one of the finest in Europe. But the Luftwaffe's fierce aerial bombardment of Warsaw in September 1939 damaged much of the zoo, killing many of the animals. The Żabińskis did what they could to save their beloved zoo, and as we'll hear, as the situation for Jews in the city began to deteriorate, they did what they could to save their lives too, and at a considerable personal risk. Luckily, the villa they lived in with their young son Richard was untouched. It was to become a remarkable place of shelter and rescue. But first, a little background information. Jews had been living on Polish soil for many centuries, and at the outbreak of war, almost 3.5 million lived in the country. It was the largest population in Europe, and as the epicenter of Jewish life on the continent, it was destined to become the focal point of Hitler's stated aim, the annihilation of the Jewish race in Europe. "10% of the Polish population was Jewish. That is a huge figure. To put it into context, consider Britain today. The total population of the country is 65 million. If the UK had the same proportion of Jews than pre-war Poland, there would be 6.5 million Jewish British residents. In fact, the number of Jews that live in the country today is around 270,000. That's less than half of 1%. And the capital city, Warsaw, was the heart of Poland's Jewish community. Almost a third of its population were Jews. After New York, the figure of 400,000 was the second largest concentration of Jews in the world. The Jews of Warsaw were hugely diverse. Many lived in the densely populated Jewish quarter of the city and only spoke Yiddish, the everyday language of many of Europe's Jews. There were numerous religious Jews who wore the characteristic traditional dark clothing of previous generations, as well as many non-religious Jews who were indistinguishable from their non-Jewish compatriots. And there were literally hundreds of synagogues in the city, the largest of which was the beautiful Great Synagogue of Warsaw, by far the largest in Europe. Its green dome dominated the Warsaw skyline. The Germans implemented their anti-Jewish policies on the Jews of Warsaw from the beginning of their occupation. Within a year, they had completed the construction of the Warsaw Ghetto, situated largely where the Jewish quarter had been. Living conditions were horrendous. Many people were living 7, 8 or more to a room. It quickly became a breeding ground for disease, and about 1/5 of its inhabitants died from typhus, starvation and sheer cold. Death became a daily reality. Warsaw was by far the biggest of the hundreds of Jewish ghettos the Germans set up. Thousands of Jews from outside the city were forced into the already densely overcrowded area. In total, about 500,000 people were living in an area of about 3.5 square miles. To give you an idea of how small that is, here is a map of London, and this is how easily the Warsaw Ghetto would fit within it. The zoo was in the Praga neighbourhood, on the eastern side of the Vistula River that dissected the city. It had become by far the most popular visitor attraction in Warsaw. And when Trojinka, the first elephant ever to be born in Poland, arrived, the entrance queues were even longer. Prior to the war, one of Jan's Jewish friends, a zoologist called Simon Tannenbaum, had taken his famous precious collection of insects to the zoo for safekeeping. This was to prove pivotal to the rescue mission, as Jan was able to befriend a Nazi officer who regularly came to see the collection. He was able to use this friendship to obtain entry to the ghetto, something that was tightly controlled by the Germans. Unable to admit visitors to their damaged zoo, Jan and Antonina did their best to care for the surviving animals, and they began to breed pigs to keep their business afloat. This is a drawing that Jan made at the time. The zoo was a short ride away from the ghetto, and Jan was able to obtain permission to enter. The Germans thought he was collecting waste food for the pigs, but in reality he was actually smuggling in food to the starving ghetto inhabitants. He and Antonina were members of the secret Polish resistance and did all they could to hinder the German authorities. During the summer of 1942, the Nazis started to deport Jews out of the ghetto in crammed cattle truck trains. Thousands of people each day were forced to leave this way. The Nazis insisted that these people were being taken to better living conditions, but few people trusted them. Panic started to spread through the ghetto. It was extremely risky to try to escape, but for those who knew that staying meant certain death, the risk was worth taking. And Jan decided to help, although he knew he too would be killed by the Germans if he was caught. Soon, the truck that was smuggling food into the ghetto was secretly smuggling Jews out. This operation had to be carried out with great care, as there were some Poles who would actually report Jews in hiding to the German authorities in return for a small payment. When Jan's truck returned to the zoo with its secret passengers, they were directed towards a drain cover entrance to a tunnel that led to the basement of the villa. It was in the basement rooms that Jan and Antonina had planned to hide their new guests. It is uncertain exactly how many Jews stayed in the villa until false papers and a safe house could be found for them outside Warsaw, but it is believed that about 30 Jews survived the war because of this rescue plan, although Jan and Antonina also gave shelter to many members of the Polish resistance who were being hunted by the Germans. Jews in the basement had to remain completely silent throughout the day. Just above their heads was a room in the villa that was used by the zoo staff to discuss the price of pig meat with customers, and those customers were sometimes German soldiers. When that happened, Antonina sat down at the piano and played a specific piece of music very loudly as a coded warning to the Jews in the basement that there was a German in the villa. Sometimes the Jews in the basement rushed back into the tunnel to hide, but other times they had to just sit silently, praying that no one would venture downstairs. The Germans never discovered the Żabińskis rescue mission, and they were honoured by Yad Vashem, the World Centre for Holocaust Studies and Commemoration, as Righteous Among the Nations in 1965. The zoo is now as popular to the residents of Warsaw as it was in the Żabińskis' time, and the villa is now a popular museum where this amazing story of heroism is told.